the hospital at Arbor Health. And we wanted to come up with an opportunity. This whole week is our Wellness Week. For those of you who have been watching the information out there, letters have gone out, newsletters. This whole week is a week to kind of focus in our community on just trying to get people to think in line with being well. And oftentimes when we think of wellness, we always want to go right to diet and exercise, which we'll talk a little bit about, but there's much more to wellness than that. And so I hope that tonight, as we present some fun talks, and you'll see that there's a much broader category of wellness than we might think about. So we are also recording these for people so we can get them online so that you can, if you like what you see tonight, you can share with your friends, and hopefully within the next few weeks we'll have them posted to our website, where we also have a few other presentations that we did last year in the middle of COVID. We did it all virtual and it was online as well, so there's a few that are there that you can check out as well. So tonight we're going to go through 5 different talks, and we decided to do them kind of more in a TED Talk format, so short, sweet, to the point, and try to make it somewhat entertaining for you all as well. We have some nice interesting topics that we'll be covering. We have 5 presenters. Our first one is going to be Dr. Travis Podbilski. He's one of our providers at our Randall Clinic. He's going to be doing his presentation, and then when you see him scurry out, it's because he also has hospital duties right now, and he has a patient waiting to be admitted. So we're glad that he's here with us. And then after that, we have Dr. John Gobble, who is part of Lifestyle Medicine Group. They do a lot of medical nutrition therapy counseling with our community, and he's got a very interesting presentation I think you'll enjoy as well. After that, we have our speech language pathologist, Nicasia Gabiola, is going to be sharing a very interesting talk with you, and I'm just going to let you hear it from her because it'll be much more interesting than if I try. And then after that, we're going to be hearing from our local ambulance people. Mike is going to be sharing some things that we might not think about, or things that we should think about in order to be safe, because they've seen a lot of things that we probably don't want to see, and there's a lot that they learn from that will keep you well. So we're excited about them sharing some with us as well. And then finally, at the end, we're going to have a talk on some great local hikes. I think many of you know that we live in an amazing area with some world-class hiking. I mean, world-class. I was just down in Southern Oregon this last weekend talking to a friend of mine. They are huge hikers, and I said, you need to come visit. And when we were talking about that, he says, yeah. He said, well, maybe if there's some good hiking. And I said, well, we started talking, and I mentioned Goat Rocks Wilderness, and his eyes got really light. And he said, we're planning on going there in a couple of weeks. So it's known all over, and lots of beautiful things. And so we're going to be learning about that as well. So at this point, I'm going to sit down and be quiet, and I'm going to turn the talks over to our presenters. They're going to be talking to you for about 15-20 minutes or so, and then they'll take some questions if you have a few at the end. And then when they're done, the next person will just step right up and we'll continue on. All right? All right. Without further ado, I'm going to give you the microphone.
All right. I guess this solves the problem if I don't know what to do with my hands when I'm talking. They give me something to hold in both of them. So I guess Health Week, that's pretty great. I like that we're doing a Health Week thing for the community. I think that's a pretty awesome thing to do for a small town, small community, and it sort of fits with my personal mission of live healthy, live happy, live longer. And so I'm happy to join you guys today to give you a talk about blood glucose and exercise. My name is Dr. Podbilski. As Edwin said, I'm a physician at the Randall Clinic. So happy National Waffle Day. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the whole National Calendar Day. There's 3 or 4 different ones, but today's Waffle Day. So if you haven't done that yet, have some for dinner. So what we're going to do, talk a little bit about glucose. I'll tell you some stuff about glucose, what it is, where it comes from, just really general in regards to that, how it's used and stored in the body. We'll get into a little bit about insulin sensitivity, a little bit about diabetes. If you know me, I like to talk about diabetes. And anytime I think about blood sugar, I often do think about diabetes. And so then we'll talk about exercise and blood sugars, different exercises. If you have diabetes, you certainly could have low sugars from exercise. So we'll talk about that, how to manage that, some recommendations about exercise, and then we'll do some time for questions. So what is glucose? You might have heard someone say C6H12O6. That's the chemical formula. I actually saw a t-shirt one time that said C6H12O6 lover. And so if you're a chemistry person, or if you get that, that's basically like a carb lover or sugar lover. And I always thought that was kind of funny. Glucose is one of the smaller structures, and so it's composed of those three things, but it's a monosaccharide, and so that's something, the smallest version of sugar that you can have. From there you have your disaccharides, which is two different types together, and those start to build together and form a carbohydrate like bread, juices, fruits, table sugar, things like that. Our body uses glucose as energy, so we do need some amount of glucose. It's broken down from the food you eat a piece of bread, you drink some juice or something like that, your body is going to turn that into glucose and use it for energy. One example of sugar, of course, is the table sugar we have, which is not a monomer like glucose, but it's fructose and glucose together. There's milk and sugar in milk, and that's called lactose. And some people you may know have a lactose intolerance, and so they can't have dairy. And that's also two sugars put together. It's a disaccharide, so that's the lactose and glucose. Both of them have glucose, and so they're both broken down to their smaller structure of glucose after you eat them. How does the body store it? The body doesn't really store it as glucose. So you do have blood sugars that you can measure with lab tests and things like that, but our body stores sugar as this thing called glycogen. It's in our muscle cells, it's in our liver, it's just a bunch of glucose molecules sort of linked together in this big thing called glycogen. And when the body needs it, the liver will tell the body to start breaking that glycogen down into blood sugar so that the body can use it for energy. That didn't turn out very well, but that's kind of, so all of those little guys are glucose, the little circles, and so you can see glycogen is just composed of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of those glucose molecules. And so I mentioned it's stored in the liver and the muscles. There's a large amount in the liver, so the single place that has the most glycogen is the liver, but there's more of it throughout the body because it's also stored in skeletal muscle, and we have more skeletal muscle than we have liver. And so the majority of our glycogen stores are actually put in our muscles, and they can be readily used as energy when you do some sort of exercise. The muscle can break that down relatively independently, and then when those glucose or those glycogen stores start to go down, then the liver kicks in and it's responsible for sort of sensing the body's needs and saying, okay, we can store some more glycogen if we have room, or we can start to break it back down into blood sugar, and then the muscles can use it. This is kind of a diagram of how that works. So the pancreas makes insulin, makes glucagon. It sort of tells our liver to hold down to that sort of thing, and then it gets broken down into glucose, and then that's how it gets into the bloodstream, and that's what we detect when we're checking for blood sugars. Homeostasis is kind of a funny sounding word, but it's just keeping things the same, basically. And so that whole process that I showed you the picture of is the body's way of keeping blood sugar steady. The body likes to have a certain temperature, it likes to have a certain blood sugar level, it likes to have certain electrolytes levels, like potassium and sodium, and there are hundreds of processes that go on in the body to sort of keep those levels where the body wants them to be. Lots of enzymes are involved in that. Glycogen storage really has a big part in that because the body wants to have a certain amount of glucose, and if the homeostasis isn't able to be obtained because of an inability to store it, process it, or use it, then you start having these elevated blood sugars. This is another just quick picture of a small amount, but these are a lot of the different homeostasis type processes that our body has to try and keep everything all in a certain level with our brain, the pituitary, our kidneys. Really very complicated process. The body is kind of an amazing thing in that way. That just gives you an idea of how sort of intense it is. Insulin sensitivity is when you start to develop inability to react to insulin the way that our body should. A normal person can release a small amount of insulin, which can handle a small or moderate amount of glucose. But over time, when the body gets saturated with this stuff, it starts to become sort of used to it. And so that homeostasis level starts to shift. And then the body doesn't respond to insulin as well as it should. That's low sensitivity. Sometimes you hear that talked about as insulin resistance. Higher sensitivity, again, just means that you can use less insulin to be able to get the body back to the level that it wants to be at. More insulin resistance, decreased insulin sensitivity is what really ends up being diabetes in the end. And this is kind of a chart that represents that, showing in blue a normal person That bump there on the left side of the graph is when you ingest a carbohydrate load, your body responds, a little bit of insulin comes down, and it really just levels back out to where it's supposed to be. And you can see pre-diabetic, kind of the insulin-resistant phase, and then up to diabetes, where your body has a really hard time naturally during its normal homeostasis pathways bringing blood sugar back down to a normal level. And then diabetes is really just getting to that point. A lot of times you'll hear, if you're not diabetic and you're not familiar with that, you'll hear people reference a lab called an A1C. That's sort of what we use to track blood sugars. It's an interesting lab in that it's not a blood sugar that tells me what your blood sugar is right now, but it gives me an average over the last 90 days or so of what your blood sugars have been like. And so that's what we use to track somebody's blood sugar over time that has diabetes. So the other part of this talk was exercise. So how exercise affects blood sugar. You're essentially using activity. So if you remember from the beginning, we're using blood glucose for energy. So when our muscles start doing something, when I'm walking, if I'm going up and down stairs, picking things up, our muscles need energy to recover and perform those tasks. And so the body will break that glucose down for energy from the glycogen that it gets stored. And it's got to replace that, and so you can start to lower your blood sugar by doing those exercises and utilize that blood sugar instead of trying to make the body store it. And so some people ask me, like, well, does it matter what I do? And yeah, absolutely it matters what you do. Certainly do anything if you're going to do something, because just getting up and moving around is great. But if you do something at a higher intensity, so it's kind of the difference between walking and running. So if I'm walking, I'm using the same muscles essentially, and I'm using a little bit of energy, I'm getting some glucose, but then if I start to run, that intensity level increases. My heart rate goes up, my muscles need to move faster, they may need to carry a heavier load, and so it'll use more glucose because there's a higher demand on the body. Also, something I put on here, more of a joke, squats is finger curls, right? You're doing kind of the same action, you're bending a couple of joints, but this isn't getting very much. And so when I'm sitting there watching TV and doing finger curls, I'm not getting as much demand on my body, and so glucose utilization than I am if I'm doing squats or something like that. So that was, yeah, a little joke on my part. Here's another graphical representation done by a sports medical group where it just sort of tells you the intensity and how quickly you can deplete those glycogen storages. So on the left side of the graph, the y-axis there going up is the glycogen storage, how much you've got, and then the x-axis there is over time. And you can see on the far left, so VO2 max, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it just means how hard you're working. Like, am I getting an oxygen demand at a certain level of my body? Like 120, 150%, that's some insane person doing maybe sprints or something like that. And then off to the left using 50% of your VO2 max, which is just 50% of your effort. And you can see that it takes a lot longer to deplete those glycogen stores than if you're really getting after something at a very high intensity. And so this is just another sort of graphical representation of how intensity matters on how much glycogen your body will break down and then use that glucose as energy. And then everybody wants to know what exercise to do. There's a huge market on that. You hire personal trainers, you buy programs online. It's a $1 billion industry to tell you what exercise to do. But really, if you're trying to get your glucose down, if you're trying to get healthy, maybe a little bit more fit, just start by walking. If you get out and do some walking, you're going to be using large muscle groups in your legs. And I hit a different button. You're going to be using large muscle groups in your legs, and so those are going to utilize a lot of energy, and you're doing something. You can work up to jogging, you can work up to weight training, but if you've got stiff joints, you're sore, you've got some sort of pain, walking can certainly improve all of those things. The motion is lotion kind of saying is a pretty good rule of thumb to use, because maybe your knees hurt, but the more you start to do things, the more active you get. You might lose some body weight, which will take some pressure off your joints, and you'll also get some lubrication in those joints. And so if you start by walking, sort of work through that kind of thing and get up to something extra if you want to, or just keep walking. That's a great thing to do for your body. It's good for your cardiovascular health. It'll get your heart rate going up a little bit, and it will help your body use some of that extra energy. Something I hear all the time, I don't even think there is a gym in Morton. I work in Randall, and everybody tells me I don't have a gym, so I can't work out, I can't exercise. And I get that. It's a great excuse, And it can feel real too. It can feel real. Be like, hey, I don't have anywhere to go. There's no personal trainer for me to go see. There's no coach to tell me how to lift. And that can be a real concern. It's also good that you're thinking about that, because just picking up a barbell or some dumbbells and doing something could be dangerous. You could hurt yourself. And so having proper technique for that is a great thing to be thinking about. But at home, again, we talked about walking. You can do that anywhere. We live in a great place. There's going to be another talk coming up about hikes. You can get out, you can do some hikes. Body weight exercises. Have you guys ever seen a gymnast before? Like, they look really fit, right? They do go to gyms, but they do a lot of body weight stuff. And so push-ups, sit-ups, air squats is just meaning like doing a squat without a barbell on your back. So just squatting up and down like you're sitting in a chair. Grabbing a jump rope, doing some jump rope outside. All great things you can do at home. Don't require any equipment, don't require a gym membership. And so while I understand it's disappointing not to have a fitness center to go to, if you're just getting started, these are some really great places to start. And then, how many calories are burned is always a great question that people ask, and so I put a few examples on here. Excuse me. It doesn't necessarily tell you how much a certain activity is going to lower your blood sugar, because everybody's different. Everybody's metabolism is different, everybody's body weight is different, and depending on your body weight, you'll burn more or less calories because it can take more energy to move your body. So just slow walking, that can burn about 200 calories an hour, and I'm just talking about walking out around the block, taking the dog for a nice long walk after dinner. Going on a hike, you're starting to add some elevation into there, and so you're having to use more of your muscles, stabilization type things, and that can burn up to 500 calories per hour. The calisthenics I mentioned earlier, push-ups, sit-ups, if you're just doing that relatively easy, a few sets of 10 or 15 or whatever you can do, and then switching to a different exercise, again, and then you can look at the list here. I don't have to read it all for you, but you can see circuit training, the fifth one down there, is where you're doing something, you're going from station to station relatively quickly without any rest, and that's the reason that burns so much more calories, is because you're upping that intensity level. Your heart rate's going to be up, and so you're going to burn more calories. As far as calories go, if I'm saying I'm burning, let's say 400 calories, there are every macronutrient, so fat, protein, carbohydrates, have a certain calorie count associated with them. So every protein and every carbohydrate gram has 4 calories associated with it, and then fat has 9 calories associated with it. So if I'm doing a generalization here, if I'm burning 400 calories, I'm burning 100 grams of carbohydrates because of the 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates. And so that can sort of help you think about how much sugar you might be utilizing when you're thinking about burning calories. Even stretching, just moving those muscles around for a little while can burn up to 150 calories. Yoga, things like that, relatively low impact, low intensity. You're still moving your body, you're still moving your muscles. You're still going to get a good amount of calorie burn from that. Being here, one of the reasons I like living here so much is there's hikes, there's lakes, there's so many things to do outside. I do like to kayak and paddleboard. My daughter lately likes the paddleboard, but her idea of that is laying on the paddleboard while I'm paddling around and she's getting some sun, which is fine. But then even swimming, like leisurely swimming, you're using so many muscle groups when you're swimming. You're using your legs, using your back, using your arms. Just playing around the lake or the pool, swimming around can burn up to 500 calories an hour. And so you can really start to see a significant buildup over time if you're starting to do these exercises. And then there's a picture of a couple kids and their dad out paddleboarding, having some fun in the lake, being fit, burning some calories, lowering their blood glucose, staving off diabetes and insulin sensitivity. That's me and my kid. We're out doing a hike just a couple miles from here, actually, before I started working here. And so, again, I said we were going to talk about hypoglycemia. So if you do have diabetes, if you're taking insulin, you're taking a secretagogue, which is a really silly word, but it just means there's a group of in diabetes medicines called sulfonylureas. If you're on them, you probably know what I'm talking about. Those make the pancreas release more insulin, and so once you do those sorts of things, the body's going to do what it's going to do based on what the medication you take. And so if you take something and your pancreas starts to release more insulin, or if you inject insulin, you're going to need to be a little bit careful if you're going to start to introduce exercise, especially if you've had a good tight control. And so you do have to be a little bit careful because your glucose can be lowered faster. If I inject my insulin, I have my normal lunch, and then I go on a walk, I might start to need to check my glucose more often until I know how that's going to affect me. Some symptoms of low blood sugar, you really just feel kind of bad. You're sweating, you don't feel very good, you can start to feel your heart sort of beating out of your chest, that butterfly in your chest feeling. These are things to look out for if you are a diabetic that start to do exercise. If you're feeling any of these symptoms, check your blood sugar and make sure that you're not going too low. And so these are some sort of things you can do. Watch the intensity of the exercise. Really just play with it when you're starting out. Start out slow, check your blood sugars often, find out what a certain activity is going to do to your blood sugar so you can kind of predict that and maybe even adjust your medications. There's this thing called a 15-15 rule from the American Diabetes Association, where if you check your blood sugar, if you're under 100, you do some sort of 15-gram carbohydrate load. And so that's a glucose tablet. 40 ounces of juice on average have about that much glucose in it. If you're really desperate, a tablespoon of sugar. And then keep checking every 15 minutes until you get above 100. If you continue to have low glucose, talk to your doctor. Nothing is like set in stone or perfect. I can't tell you if this, then definitely that, because everybody's different. But playing with it and trying to find out how you're going to react to those different activity levels is important. And then if you're going to start a regular exercise plan and you notice that you're continuing to be low, talk to your doctor. You might be able to reduce the amount of insulin you take. You might be able to reduce the amount of medications you get. And that can be great news for anybody who's got any type of medications they take every day, because those can be difficult to remember. They can be kind of a pain. And so if you're able to do something on your own to reduce that, that's a really great reason to celebrate, actually. And so your doctor would be happy to do some of that for you. Motivation's also difficult. I have this all the time. Anybody who exercises has trouble with motivation. They just got off a long day of work. They're not really having a good day. Maybe they just really want a piece of cake and then they don't want to go exercise after that. Having a workout partner can be really helpful. I tell people that I talk to in clinic, talk to your spouse about going on a walk after dinner. That's a great time to start utilizing some of that sugar that you just ingested in your meal. Again, walking is great for fitness, and it's a really simple thing to do. Take the dog for a walk after dinner, or just go on a walk and talk to your spouse about their day. You might find you can even be a little bit more happier in your relationship in that way, because you're talking a little bit more. You don't, after dinner, you don't turn on the TV and then it's over until you go to bed. A workout partner is also really great. Help you stay accountable. I don't know if you guys recognize the lady on the right there. She's actually a physician out in Mossy Rock. She's been my workout buddy for quite a while. That's us doing, I think, our 4th or 5th Tough Mudder, which is a mud race, which is really a lot of fun if you start to work up to that type of competition. You have a goal set. Those are a lot of fun. It's September 25th this year, if anybody's interested. It's a really good time, actually. Maybe we can do an Arbor Health team next year.
We have a color run this weekend.
I know, and I did it last year, but I'm going to be doing a booth at the thing this year, so I won't be running the 5K this
I'm
year.
just saying for the crowd.
Yes, run the 5K, walk the 5K, get up and move around. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so some recommendations that I said in the agenda that I would do: walking 30 minutes a day, 3 to 5 days a week. Make it a family routine. Once you start to develop these patterns of thought, I want to go walk, and you turn those patterns of thought into patterns of action, those habits can be hard to break. All of our habits we've developed over our lifetime. Putting a new one in the mix can be difficult, but once you get into it, you really start to become a routine, and it's just part of your day, and it doesn't feel like a drag anymore. Play a new sport, get out there, get a group of people together, play a softball game, play a soccer game, go play basketball. The squatting things, if you're really having trouble, you don't feel like you're good at balance, you don't want to go anywhere to work out, just sit down in a chair and stand up 10 times, or as many times as you can. Get those big legs working, get yourself moving. Push-ups don't have to be on the floor. I've had people tell me I can't do a push-up. When I lay down, I can't push my body weight up, and that's fine. That's a lot of people have that either strength reduction or that restricted range of motion. Lean on the wall, start doing wall push-ups, and then start to move your legs back more and more until you end up on the floor, or you end up on the couch or something like that. Just start somewhere, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. And any questions, talk to your doctor. Any of the doctors, providers, nurse practitioners, PAs at Arbor Health will be happy to talk to you about an exercise. We all want you to live happy. We all want you to live healthy. And so make an appointment and talk to somebody if you're interested in starting a workout program. Any questions? Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, guys. I'll turn it over to Edwin.